Well, good day, everyone. Today we have Marjorie Hope, who graduated from Salisbury University and obtained a postgraduate certification from the London School of Economics and Harvard University. As a competitive gymnast, she owned and operated a large gymnastics school, embracing the synergy between mind, body, and spirit, and while incorporating the importance of being fit for life and that more is possible. In 2016, she founded America Connected, an international nonprofit and nonpartisan organization teaching people around the world how to connect through cultural diplomacy. Marjorie, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Gerald.
Excellent, excellent. Listen, I'm so excited to get into your book and all the things that you want to talk about and that I want to know about, because after going through your book and coming up with some questions for you, it's gotten me really intrigued about your thought process and the research you did and all the things that you put into it. But let me ask you this. What has helped you at this point in your life get to this point where you're an author, started a business, started a connection organization, non-profit and nonpartisan, to connect people around the world? What has made you so successful?
You know, one thing I have found through all of my travels and talking to people is that people are people.
Yes.
We all have so much more in common. And although we do have many differences, and we do need to learn to respect each other, because it is okay to not like someone, but you have to respect them. And what I found is that balancing the combination of mind, body, and spirit, it's actually what brings us together in a holistic well-being. It kind of think about it as nurturing the mind, which involves learning, self-reflection, and embracing the challenges. And look, every day we have life challenges. But again, that balance that you find, it can help keep you balanced and realizing that, hey, these challenges are going to be thrown at me. And we need to have this healthy mind and body through good food, regular exercise, adequate rest. And a lot of times what we see is when people are wrestling up in the world and things are getting unsettled, a lot of that is that they are out of balance, and our world can become out of balance. And it's a matter of stepping back and taking a deep breath and saying, it's okay, we can do this. And it's okay to not like what's going on. And you're always going to find that. But again, it's taking that deep breath, respecting what is going on, and then finding out, when you step back, how we can make this work. And I have found a lot of times it's fear,
Yeah.
Gerald, which is false evidence appearing real. And it's that fear that throws people off. And again, you have to find the balance. But what I found through my originally, when I got started with this, was through my political game that I was working with, is that people had fear, and it was letting them kind of go off balance. And we don't need that in our world. We need unity. We need to bring everybody together and
Right.
find out how we can do that in the right way.
Exactly, exactly. When someone's focused on fear, one, it impacts the amygdala, and the amygdala shuts down the body, right? And it shuts down,
Right.
it shuts down the thinking part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and now we're just kind of focused on, the animal part of the brain, which is just survival, right? Fight, flight, freeze, and appease. We get into that state, and we can't think clearly when that happens. And as you're talking, it reminded me of why when we first met, and we're talking about being a part of the on the show and interviewing, why I thought what you had to bring to the table was so important, especially when you talk about the concept of mind, body, and spirit, because the idea of productivity smarts is holistic. It's about being aligned, right? It's not just about producing more and having more and doing more and more. It's about how do you do it in a way that you not only get to the destination and enjoy the destination when you get there, but you also enjoy the journey? And the only way to do that is you take consideration of the mind, body, spirit experience holistically and doing that together. What do you think is poorly understood about this area of cultural diplomacy that you talk about in your book?
Well, I think, again, going back to our world right now is experiencing a lot of growth, a lot of changes.
Right.
We have never been so close together as far as in our world, and yet so far apart.
Right.
So Winston Churchill actually had a really good quote, and he said, "The world is a dangerous place to live, not because of the people who are evil, but because of the people who do not do anything about it."
Mm,
So our world right now really is in a brink of transformation
yes.
and anticipation. But we can navigate those twists and turns. We just need to have courage, curiosity, and be able to confront the challenges and mysteries, kind of taking a step back and looking at all the great things that we have going on. Globalization is not a bad thing. And that's again where the fear comes in and the anxiety.
Right. Right. Now, the next question I have for you is kind of like, I want to hear your story from the perspective of, we don't wake up one day and go, oh, cultural diplomacy, that's exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so we have a journey of how do we get here? So how did you get to this place through your career, um, to realize that cultural diplomacy, that was your purpose or focus area and where you felt like you could make the greatest impact?
Well, I was involved with politics, and what I found is that again, there was a lot of fear, anxiety going on in that area
Yes.
of what was going on, and I really have a commitment to uniting people over dividing them. And that method sounds so simple, right? It actually cost me a lot of friends, and people didn't like that idea. And I'm like, look, we are all in one world,
Right.
one planet. This is all we have. If we don't start uniting each other, we will be divided and we won't have a world to be in.
Right.
And actually, when I was traveling in different countries, specifically, let's just say two things that I can think of right off the bat. In Italy, I looked up in Rome in the balconies and I saw all the flags of Italy on their balconies. And I thought, wow, what a nice thing the government put. Wait, the government didn't put flags there, Margie. The people put their flags there. And then it was like, wait a second, it sounds so silly, right? But they love their country as much as I love my country.
Right.
And yes, that sounds funny, but it was like an epiphany, like, wow, everybody can love each other and love our differences. The other interesting thing I had happen is I was in Dubai and I was on a train and I had a situation where I was talking to a young girl that had come on about the culture and the differences and just, really nice girl explaining things to me. And then her stop came and I noticed out of the corner of my eye a sheep looking at me. And I thought, oh dear, I hope I haven't done anything wrong. So I said, hi, I hope I didn't do anything, that you don't approve of. I was just trying to find out about your culture and learn about it. And he laughed and he said, oh, I just care about making money. And I said, it made me laugh. And I said, that is so funny. And I said, but let me ask you, I said, when I was in town, I noticed a lot of people didn't seem to like me. They kind of looked like get me funny. And he said, well, that's because the internet wasn't as common for a lot of people that are older. And so they're not used to your culture. And I thought about it and I said, well, that makes a lot of sense. Anyways, I said, can I get my picture with you? And I didn't know what he would say, but he said, of course.
Oh, wow.
And then Gerald, he did the most amazing thing in the picture. And I have this in my book. He gave me a thumbs up. And I went, that's what it's all about. As different as night and day, ideology, religion, the way we looked, our beliefs, our culture.
Right.
But he recognized we are all people.
Yes. Yes. And that brings me to, and thank you for that. And that brings me to your book, Connect Diplomacy.
Yes,
And I like the way you spell it because you leave off the D and just go right from connect to diplomacy, but it's
right.
out the D there. And the subtitle is using our differences to connect. And obviously, that's a great example of what you mean by that in the book. Now, one of the first questions I have for you, as I was scanning through the book and looking at it, I know that there were sections where you talk about diplomacy and different types of diplomacy, but you also talk about the politics. And I think sometimes for people, when they hear politics and diplomacy, they may look at them as the same thing, right? Because it's because you have a diplomat who's and he's going over to do diplomatic diplomacy with a country, and there's different cultural aspects and policies and things, and so it gets kind of really tied into politics. But it sounds like there's a difference. Can you explain that difference? What you mean by in the book?
It is very different. First of all, you have to remember George Washington, when he was leaving office, actually said, what will hurt our nation is parties. He did not believe in political parties, and he was very upset about that. When you get into political parties, everybody has their own agenda. I'm
Right.
not saying what's right or wrong. What I'm saying, though, is they don't look for that commonality. They really don't. They want their own side, and we can see this, what's happening right now.
Yes.
We have to take a step back because we cannot keep going this way. And we have to keep, and people, I've actually heard people say, why do we need to be friends with anyone else? We have an ocean between us. No, we don't. That ocean, yes, it's there. But we are so connected with the internet and through all of the, like right now, everything we're wearing, what we're doing, our cell phones, our chips are from a different country, our phones are from somewhere else, our clothes are from somewhere else. Everything is from all over the world.
Right.
And it's kind of like you get more together than you do by yourself.
Yes.
And so we have to look at it that way, and it's not going to always be perfect. But yeah, the politics doesn't always look at it that way, because they're looking at, they just want their side to win to get their agenda in. And I think both sides tend to do that. And we have to really look at it from a strategic point of view and say, what works best for all of us, not just one side.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And that leads me to the next topic where you talk about the transformative power, and I love that word, the transformative power of cultural diplomacy. What do you mean by that?
Again, it's finding out what you have in common. If you go to another country, let's say Japan. In Japan, they like to greet people and they'll go konnichiwa. When they say thank you, it's arigato. And they do a lot of bowing with the hands.
Right.
Well, that's what they like. Why not, when you go there, appreciate that? And that's showing respect. Arigato. When I was in the hotel and I think I had something I had dropped or something that I was eating, and they came running right over and I said, arigato. And he smiled because a lot of Americans don't want to take part in their culture. But cultures are just, it doesn't make it right or wrong. It means that's what we're a part of.
Right.
I have found everyone, everywhere I have ever gone to, and people ask me, what's your favorite country? Everybody's been wonderful. I've never had a problem.
Yeah.
It's a funny story I'll tell you. I was in Japan and we had visited the government center
Okay.
like you might visit here.
Right.
And I walked out, we were hungry, and I thought, well, gosh, in America, I know that in the same building, there's a lot of different places like cafeterias you can eat. They must have something here. Oh, look, I found it. But then I saw a crowd over in the corner. So I asked what would be maybe the maitre d' there, I guess, what is going on over there? And he says, that is the prime minister. Oh, how exciting, I thought. Can I go say hi? And he said, you can go say hi, if you want to. I said, okay. And so I said to my group I was with, I'll be back. And so I walked over and I said, I actually said, konnichiwa, hello. And you know what? I was welcomed by the Prime Minister of Japan. He was so nice and so amazing. I said, I'm from America. I came to see your beautiful country. I spoke a little Japanese, but mostly it was in English. I'm not sure if he understood everything, but he seemed to. And he appreciated that I said hello. He appreciated and I appreciated the kindness. And that's what I'm saying. People are people.
Right.
And it doesn't, matter who you are or what you are. It's that we're all human beings on this one planet. And that's what diplomacy is all about.
Gotcha. Gotcha. It makes sense because, as an American, if you travel around America, you will realize that there are different cultures with inside of the walls of America, whether you're in the South, whether it's the Southeast, or if you're in the South and it's the Southwest. Those are very different cultures, or if you're in the Northwest compared to the Northeast or the Midwest. Again, all different cultures and the way the way we do things, our breakfast routines, our morning routines, the foods we eat, some of the words we say, and some of the words
Right.
we use to call things. And you can tend to stand out if you go to another part of the country and call a soda, and they're
Right.
calling it a pop. You're like, what's a
Right.
pop? Right? It's like a whole new language. And so, but it's the same way when you are in that culture. Learning a little bit about that particular culture allows you to kind of fit in, and it also lets those who are from that culture know that you respect the way they do things, and it opens them up to be a little bit more influenced by you as well. So I can definitely see how that plays. Now, you also talk about the many faces of diplomacy. Can you talk about that? What do you mean by the many faces of diplomacy?
Well, there's many different aspects to diplomacy. You can have diplomacy through music. You could have it through, going to a movie of a different culture, going to a restaurant, going to talk to people in a marketplace. Diplomacy is basically finding out what you have in common and embracing that. Again, you don't have to agree with it. You don't have to like it,
Right.
but respect it. And I think that's something that's very, very important. And we've all heard the phrase, the ugly American.
Mm,
What that really is about somebody thinking they're better than somebody else. And we do that, like you said, even in our country,
right.
oh, that person's from, and I mean no disrespect when I say this, but just for sake of kind of making my point, oh, he's from New York, that's why. I mean no disrespect, but it's just what I'm saying is we have to honestly think about it. You're visiting somebody in a different area than where you live, and they do things differently. And that's what diplomacy is about. Again, you don't have to agree with it, but why not respect their way of doing it
Right.
because it works for them?
Exactly, exactly. And you also talk about diplomacy connections. And the thing that you talk about were you no connectors is what you called it, connectors, diplomacy connectors, and you talk about the trifecta of cultural diplomacy, economic diplomacy, and public diplomacy. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, in fact, I just did a post the other day on social media on economic diplomacy,
Okay.
which is money. And I'll just talk about that for a second. Money is a connector and it can be a disconnector, obviously. What's interesting right now, what we have going on in our world is cryptocurrency.
Right.
Again, fear a lot of people have. Now, it's not real popular yet, and a lot of people have the fear about it. But here's what's good about it. If you're in Africa and you don't have a bank account and you don't even live near a bank, but with cryptocurrency, you don't need a bank. You don't need a bank account. So you can play in the same field as somebody living in America, let's say, and buying the same thing. And it's interesting how it works because it's connected us. Now, there's a lot of flaws with it and things I think have to be worked out. But the possibility to see how it can connect us is absolutely amazing. Um, and another thing that happens is we had a situation, well, there was a situation in Africa again, where there were 5 ports in Mombasa, Abidjan, I'm sorry, I don't have them all in my head. I forgot 3 of them, but they were ports that China had come and redone these ports for them and made them really nice. And so somebody from America came and said, why didn't you let America do it? And it was an interesting comment that this man said. He said, well, look, he goes, we would have, but you guys wanted to charge us for it. He goes, look around, we don't have any money. And he goes, well, and the American man said, well, you're going to owe China now. And he goes, you know what? You're right. But guess what? We now have a place to sleep. and we now have food. So we'll worry about that because at least, and that's what diplomacy is about. It's like they needed an even playing field
Right.
to be able to have the diplomacy. And yeah, the ocean between us used to be like that because 150 years ago, if you wanted to get to America, there were no planes, but you could take a boat.
Right.
It might take you 3 months to get here, at least. And now, like I said, with the internet, that's another form of diplomacy, and you can do that automatically. I actually, in my book, I talked to over 100 countries, Gerald, but there are 60 in the book. And I asked everybody, and these were friends of friends and people I knew, and they were amazing. And I said, why do we need, connect diplomacy? Why do we need to connect? But every single person, this is what was so amazing when I talk about this. We need to connect to have peace and live in our world. Some were in broken English, but amazingly, they all said the same. I
Mm.
had one girl from Iran who said to me in an email, I will only respond to your email if you promise in writing you will never use my name or I will be killed. So I responded to her, no problem, absolutely. And in the book, I've got her as name withheld per request. But she said the same thing. We need to connect to have peace in our world
Right.
because everyone recognizes it. And that's why I said people are people.
Exactly, exactly. That's very, very powerful. And, between the cultural diplomacy and economic, and like you said, the public diplomacy of the internet. And, and there's something too that I thought about that you allude to in your book, but it's also the way that we as people connect even on an energetic level with each other around the world. That, the things that we do here, it does affect other people in other countries, even if you don't have face-to-face time with them or speak with them. It's just the human culture, the human being, our presence is so strong that it influences the earth that we live on, and it influences the vibration of what's going on in other countries. And so if we're striving to be people at peace and meditate and that holistic mindset of body, mind, and spirit, we can also positively impact the other parts of our world and our local culture as well as our international culture. What are your thoughts around that?
Oh my goodness. I'm so excited with you saying this. I was taking a group right before the pandemic to India.
Yeah.
We had 11 people, and I spoke to a yoga studio there, and they were hesitant. And the one thing the woman said to me is, okay, if you do not speak politics. I said, of course not, no problem. She was a little weary of us. We got there, and after 1 hour, the first hour, we did the yoga with them. And again, it was to connect. She came over to me and she said, now remember, she was weary of me,
Right.
but she said, whatever you're planning to do the rest of the day, and this was in the morning, cancel it. We are going to show you India. Now, that was amazing. She showed us and when someone says that to you, you go, absolutely, because you're getting to see the real thing. It was
Mhm.
amazing. And not only that, she showed us a corner called Shamendala, which has four religious areas. There's a church, a synagogue, a Hindu temple, and a mosque. They were there for and they're still there, 1,000 years.
Mm.
What made them all get along and never have a problem? Respect.
Right.
So it taught me so much because once she saw us face to face and she saw that we just wanted to connect, we just wanted to do yoga together, which is the oldest form of communication, by the way. And
Right.
I'll talk about that in a minute. But it was interesting that it connected us, and she's human to human, wanted us to see her world. So it was an amazing experience.
That's amazing. That's amazing. In fact, it kind of leads me into one of the other things I wanted to ask you that I got from your book, and you talk about globalization, obviously, and obviously a lot of your examples, because of your background and travels and things that you've done around the world, are having an impact on that. But for those of us who are beginning to, or maybe we're in the middle of our careers and we're beginning to travel internationally, or we're speaking internationally, or we're trying to grow our businesses internationally, what tips do you have for someone trying to survive in a globalized world? And why are these tips that you're going to share so important?
So I would say, don't think so much about it. Think about a little kid, let's say a 2-year-old, a 1-year-old, whatever, 1, 2, 3 years old. They're learning how to walk and talk and get along in the world. They have no fear. As far as walking, they fall down 500 times before they get up and start walking, but
Right,
they never thought to not get back up.
right,
Talking, same thing. My point is that we're all people. And the best thing I could tell a young person is go travel. It doesn't have to be believe me, I've never stayed in a 5-star hotel. I stay in very average places on purpose. I want to meet the people. I want to be with the people and learn. And I've seen people travel and they're wearing high heels. And I'm like, okay, you're not really traveling then, because to be out on these, streets that are uneven, but you can't be
yes,
wearing high heels.
yeah,
So, I love meeting the people and talking to them. And that's the best thing a young person can do, and that's actually what we see happening, because they've brought back that international globalization, that we all can get more from each other.
right.
And that's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I heard this quote, and it says that the way a person changes and learns the most is from the books they read and the people they meet. And
Right.
obviously, you read a book, and like me reading your book, I'm able to digest years and years of your research within the 300 to 400 pages of your book. But when you talk with someone who has the kind of experience you have, it's transformative because you give a new insight. Or if you travel to another country, I love international travel because you learn, and it embodies, you're literally embodying the experience, right? Because you're smelling the food and you're seeing the scene,
Yes.
you're immersed in the culture. And I've never gone on an international trip and came back the same person. The person that
Right.
trip,
Exactly.
not the same person that came back from that trip, because I remember years ago I went to the Philippines, and just being there and seeing how people live and the things that were going on and the program I was a part of, I when I came back to America, I could not look at the world the same way. Uh,
That's right.
there's so many other, a few other countries I've been to that when I came back, my perspective, my vision of the world had been changed, and but it also made me a lot more empathetic, sympathetic, and a lot more understanding of what other people's plights are, and less judgy and more compassionate to what's to humanity, because you've been in their situation. Not that you've actually walked in their shoes, but you've been immersed in their environment, that you could feel it. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
exactly. And it's the same thing. People are people. We all eat, we all breathe, we all have to go to the bathroom. I mean, it's just, these are the human being everyday things.
Right.
And when you go to another country, and by the way, when you get off the airplane, when you land in a new country, and there's always a sign like welcome to wherever you are. I don't know if this happened to you, Joe, but it gives you the most amazing feeling in the world. And I can't even put it into words unless you actually do it. And then you're going to be like, oh yeah, I remember Marjorie Hope told me that. When you land in a new country and you see that sign, you're like, I'm here. I'm actually in, whatever country it is.
Yeah.
I'm in Spain. Oh my goodness. Now, and again, you have to, diplomacy is an interesting thing. I think this was in Italy, and I was at a pizza restaurant, and they kept ignoring me in English, but I know Spanish, so I spoke Spanish. And then they were like, oh, okay, we can help you. So that's a great example of diplomacy for whatever reason. And they were a small little restaurant. They, for whatever reason, didn't really like Americans. But when I spoke Spanish, it was like, oh, okay, well, she knows something. It must be okay. And I didn't really know much Italian. So it was like, okay, good, that worked. But, but it was an example of connecting, because then they were like, well, she was pretty nice. And, um, but honestly, all over the world, when you connect with people and you take the time to learn about them And even in our own country, just taking the time, a lot of the diversity we see and the anger and some of the politicians trying to divide us, you can't let that get to you. And you have to remember, remember, like I said, the little kid in you that doesn't know the fear, that wants to go out in the world every day. And even though they fall, they get back up. And it's the same thing. You can never give up, and you have to enjoy seeing that sunshine every day and the moon at night. And by the way, is an interesting quote in the Bible where God says, the sun and the moon and the stars I gave to all nations.
Yes.
And I think that is so, it was actually in Deuteronomy 4:19.
Yeah,
But yeah, I thought that was such a cool quote. I'm like, that's so true, right?
yes, exactly, exactly. So I have a couple more questions for you before we wrap up here. And so one of them is, in the book you chose to focus on quotes from a number of people, and there were George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and Winston Churchill. Why did you choose those people?
Yeah, I call them my five guys. So they were from five different time periods in our world,
Okay.
and they were leaders in each of those time periods. And what I did in every chapter at the end of the book, I have them sitting by the fire,
Hmm.
and usually they're eating dinner. And I'm going to get to that in 1 second. But what they do is they connect with each other, knowing what they know only from their time period, right? And they connect about a subject of that chapter in the best that they can. And it's interesting how they agree with each other at the end, but they have a different, little slightly different way of doing it. Like George Washington, if you think about it, he came over to America to get away from the other part of the world.
Right.
So diplomacy was not really something he understood completely, but yet they recognize it as they talk with each other. And by the way, the reason I have them sitting in front of a fire and eating dinner is that's something that over thousands of years has been the connector. Because when people used to carry around swords and you would invite them to eat something, that was huge because they had to put their sword down in order to eat.
Right.
And
Right.
once you did that, you began to connect with each other.
Yeah, having a meal together requires trust, because if it's your enemy, you're thinking, are they going to poison me? Or are they going to do something to my meal? Or so, and I got to put my weapon down. But if you can put your weapon down and gracefully have a meal together, there's a bonding impact of that, and there's a connection, a deeper connection that happens when you're having a meal together.
Yeah, I think if the whole world had a piece of chocolate, we'd all get together and have a great world.
Exactly, exactly. So two more questions. One, is there anything that I forgot to ask you that I should have asked you from the book that you would love to get out?
Well, I would say the healthy mind, healthy body is something important. Everyone needs to get out and do something, because getting the ants out of your pants type of thing, which could be through yoga or swimming or Pilates or whatever it is you like to do, it makes you feel better. And when you feel better, you have a clear way of thinking about things. And it's also, of course, healthy. But honestly, what it does to your body and the endorphins, and it gets everything back in place. I recommend everybody, when you get up in the morning, we all have anxiety, to drink a hot beverage, whether it's coffee, just hot water, or hot tea.
Right.
And as you sip it, the steam will actually, relax you enough to think more clearly.
Yeah.
I always say, thank you, God, for the flowers, trees, birds, and bees. Thank you for the ability to be me, and thank you for the opportunity to be the best that I can be. And what that does, I know it might sound a little corny, but it resets you. It
Yeah.
resets you for the rest of the day.
Exactly, exactly. I do yoga now, and I did it after the vertigo thing that happened to me in 2018 that I've talked about on previous podcasts. And that activity in the morning, basically, it's kind of like wringing out the wash rag. It's like
Right. It's resetting you.
it's resetting me. It's reducing the stress that my body's carrying, and it really sets me up for a great day. And I love that saying. And there's so many different routines that you can take on to reset your day. Marjorie, if someone wants to know how to get in touch with you, where should they go?
They can get to connectdiplomacy.com or Marjorie Hope at itsmarjoriehope.com.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you so much for the book, and for writing it, and for just putting all of it, all of this wisdom and insight and things that you've experienced and have identified that I think so many of us have really would need to kind of grasp and spend some time in. I really enjoyed spending time in the book, and I really thank you and enjoyed this conversation with you.
Thank you, Gerald. It was great. I had a great time.
Excellent. Thank you.